to also skip a year before we replace the old chief vehicle. So if we buy a new one this spring, let's not look at 2022 as having to get them another admin vehicle. I'd like to stagger those purchases at least a year between.
Yes, I'm hoping.
We'll create the new cycle, so let's see if we can focus now to just not get it back to back.
I'm hoping we can drag it out to 3 years. This one that's going to get less use is the admin 2, and between that and other brush trucks, they can make it last the 3. And I'd like to get in, and I can talk to the chief about that as well. Try to get that 3-year cycle going, but that would assure him every 3 years we could stick with it. Yeah, I'd rather not have the double hit, because the other, I think we're going to be up with the other ambulance very shortly. You know, we just got the one, but the other one isn't in much better shape, because it's been heavily overused, because the one we just replaced was garbage. So the one ambulance has been run, much like the police cars. They had 120,004 cars, so they run the last car nonstop until it's in the same position. I think that ambulance gets run, you know, all the time, and it's catching up very quickly on its miles, and is gonna. I hope they can go another year, but that's going to come up soon, and I'd rather keep away from the second chief car back to back.
I agree. I think we need to look at. I would request. Now, this is partly, I guess, more finance committee's role, but the capital plan isn't necessarily something that is owned by the finance committee, but it generally is, if you know what I mean. And I would suggest that the fire department needs to look at their vehicle inventory and kind of show a plan for cycling replacement vehicles for all of their vehicles. So we know if a fire truck is going to last us 15 years, put that in. So in other words, give us a 20-year cycle so we know we're probably replacing the admin vehicle 2 to 3 times in that 20 years. We might be replacing fire truck or 2 in that 20-year period. We might be replacing the ambulance, each ambulance twice in that 20-year period. I don't know. I'm just throwing out numbers, but I'd like to see a full spectrum of their fleet and get an idea of what they have and when they see those things needing to be replaced. Because they do have a higher impact to our capital plan because their vehicles are that much more costly outside the admin vehicles than our other departments.
Absolutely. I remember when I first got to town, engine 6 was relatively new. When we got the rescue truck, was brand new. Yeah, that's almost 20 years ago now. So it's, well, I believe engine 6 is over 20 years old, and the rescue is getting darn close. So even those vehicles, they seem new to the department, but they're 20 years old. And I think we're going to get longer out of both of them, but probably not a whole lot. Yeah, I think a good idea. Bob would know better than I do on the longevity of the vehicles. It's not so much mileage it kills them as body rot and pumps wearing out and things like that go on them. And he'd have a better idea of the life cycle, how long other departments are getting out of them. Some of the bigger cities replace their engines every 5 years. They just do it, which is an insane thought. But I agree. We need to get some sort of cycle period on the vehicles from the chief, and it'd help us plan better than always trying to figure it out as we go like this. We've done it with the police cars. And the other thing we haven't even talked about is Department of Public Works. A lot of those trucks are very old, and they don't necessarily have to be replaced. But at some point, those got to start going too. We got to be looking at these large 10-ton, 20-ton dump trucks, 6-wheelers, and figure that out too, because those got to stop. We haven't even talked about those, but there's a fleet of 4 or 5 of those. I think they got to start getting swapped out. So
yeah, I'm definitely going to be working with those 2 departments specifically on developing better capital plans that addresses their vehicle needs over the next decade or 2, because I think it's absolutely crucial when you're trying to budget for the long term, when you have these, especially for the fire department, these massively expensive apparatus. It's definitely something we have to plan for.
I'm very happy, and they found a ladder truck that was several years old for a reasonable price. New ladder trucks, typically $1 million. So they did well to keep the ladder as cheap as they did when they got that one. And as I said before too, I think a way when we do start to get this host money into marijuana, a way to spend that is for some of these rescue vehicles. You know, the plants, you go look at where they are, they're intentionally off the grid, off the road, and specifically to use Dean's place up there. It's behind his solar field. It's got to be a quarter to a half mile off the road, uphill in a mud slick, trail going up. It certainly is not something any of our fire trucks could navigate on a rainy day or a muddy spring. So we've got to consider an all-wheel drive truck to get to these facilities to be able to provide emergency services. The ambulance I did just purchase is all-wheel drive, and he's going to have to stay with that from now on to make sure that anybody working there has the protection from the town for emergency services. So it's a good way to use some of that money as it comes in. Hopefully, if Highhawk's going to go to processing of THC and edibles, I would think it will hopefully raise their ultimate sale price, which would bring them more money and bring us more host money. So it's going to help us make some of these purchases and hopefully defer it off the levy, so we're not putting it on the levy, but using it off this host money. We'll see how far that gets us. And once again, I encourage us to consider thinking about finding a way to fit a retail shop in town. Maybe we can ask Jessica to reach out to Lester and find out what kind of impact their retail marijuana made on their tax base in town. I'd be curious as to what type of revenue they did receive from that, because I believe it's going to be substantial. It'd be nice to know before we go too far down that road. Anything else you guys have, the chief vehicle or anything on that topic? Or the marijuana while we're on it briefly?
No.
All right, we'll move on to personnel committees. We have wage authorization for Carol Witt, Library Director, C.L. Sullivan, Master, Step 1. So what are we looking at, Jessica? This is a current position, just...
Yep, she has
Step.
been here for 1 year, and so this is her step increase.
Okay, so she's going off the step minimum to step 1.
Yep.
Entertain a motion for that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept the wage authorization for Carol Witt from minimum step to step 1.
I second that.
Motion is second for the wage authorization for Carol Witt to move to a step 1. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. All right, so we're going to go right into the COVID update. Jessica?
Sure, so we have currently 8 new cases in Barre, which is a big increase from previous weeks and months. I don't have much detail on, where these individuals have tested, or why they tested positive, I should say. But just know that it is in the community, and we're also seeing a big increase in other communities like New Braintree. I think they have 4 active cases right now, which I think their first 2 active cases came last month out of this entire almost 9-month period of being in COVID. So, I think that everybody just needs to remain vigilant and be more cautious about where they're going and who they're socializing with. I know it can be incredibly tough during this time of year, but the people that you want to be around are also the people that you want to keep safe. So just keep that in mind as we head into the holiday season. I know it was tough for me and my family to not be together for the holidays. I haven't seen family for the entire period since we've been in quarantine, so I understand everybody's struggle. I also see that the governor is taking steps to be a little bit more regressive. So we are seeing field hospitals open again, we're seeing, certain treatments being delayed. Again, if it's kind of a minor treatment, they're trying to delay it and push it off, as we saw earlier in this pandemic, to open up the hospitals for services for people in more critical conditions. So, right now, the outlook's not looking too great, so I'm just gonna encourage everybody to stay vigilant.
Do you have any idea of how many people were tested? In other words, are we kind of having a standard amount tested in time and this is just a spike in results? Or have we seen a spike in testing? Because I know the schools, in many places, I'm assuming ours, and that is assume, I hate that word, but I'm assuming like when people have gone to any family or anything for the holidays, the schools required or encourage testing. So have we pushed out a whole influx in testing to find this larger group, or just curious of the correlation?
So, looking at the most recent email from our public health nurse, she said that the positive rate for Barre is 3.3%. So 8 cases would be 3.3% of the total tested.
Well, about 3 out of 100, maybe, right? Am I doing that right? If it was 9, then 1% would be 3, which would be 3 out of 100. So there must have been about 300 people and change tested for the, so how many people do we know are normally tested?
I don't know that.
See, and that's the problem. Our normal positivity rate is 0 because we don't have any until the couple of, we had about a month period, we had a few come in. And I still don't know the positivity rate from that. 8 people out of 5,000, that's not a huge, luckily not a huge cell in our town. But yeah, I think I visited my mother today for the first time in 6 months or so. I do see my kids, but I certainly don't see my extended family much at all. That's the way that's gonna continue to be for now, but as much as I hate to see the numbers go up, it's still, 8 is not a huge number. And I know people don't want to hear compare this to the flu itself as far as conditions and outcomes and things. But if this were a flu in town, you would expect that it wouldn't be 8 people have the flu. You would expect many, many, many more would have the flu. So the good side of this is 8 is a relatively low number. If this was influenza, we'd be talking about 800 or 1,000 people have the flu. I know the mortality rate's very different. The outcomes can be very different, but I'm saying as far as the infectious rate, if we had a flu in town and you had 8 people with the flu, you'd say, so what? So it's not a panic number to have 8 people test positive. I don't want to see people be hysterical and overly nervous about it. It's still 8 out of over 5,000 residents. It's a large increase for us, but as far as normally at a flu season, I know in the flu season in school, my neighbor works at elementary school, she'll say half the kids are out in the elementary school from the flu at the peak of the season. So this really isn't spreading like the flu as bad as it is right now. The actions people are taking, keeping with the quarantine they are doing is working to keep it down if we only have 8.
And then just one more update is that on December 22nd or 23rd, we, myself, Chief Rogowski, Chief Carbone, the Board of Health, and a couple of representatives from different towns will be doing a walkthrough at the regional high school, which is our anticipated distribution site for vaccine. So.
Inside, not an outside drive-through?
It'll be outside,
Okay,
drive-through.
good.
Yep.
Right, and we'll get to the tents about that in a minute. Matt, we'll go to you first, then Dylan. Anything you want to say on the updates? And
The only thing I can say is, the positivity rate, the 3.3% is an increase from the previous, positives, compared to the total tested. The rate has increased a little. Similarly statewide, that's occurred. I think the state is closer to 3.9%, something like that as of last week. And that was an increase. I would just say that one of the things that we're dealing with is because we're returning to a situation where when people do gather, they generally gather indoors now. We are entering a phase that's much more like what March and April were, and our knowledge is helping. Wearing masks, doing things like that have reduced the spread. I think Barry's been in a good situation where generally even those that have tested positive haven't hit a high level of hospitalization and things like that. But to some degree that I would just say be cautious, because you can go from 8 to 20 very quickly. If the wrong person goes to the wrong group and all of a sudden everybody leaves, and that's when all of a sudden we could start seeing a closer impact to those in town, where you may actually start getting people that have to go to the hospital actually die because we've actually had a good run here in town. You know, we've gone months now without it being a major effect, and a lot of people here in town, at least with the people in town, I'm sure a lot of us have extended family that may have been infected or even hospitalized. But it hasn't really had that same, like, impact where we're like, this well-known person in town died from COVID. And we should be thankful for that. But that doesn't mean we should ignore the fact that it could happen at any moment if we don't continue to try to do our best to just keep taking the precautions right now. The vaccine's not available. It won't be available for a few months outside of key personnel and or vulnerable people. I know we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're all eager to kind of just try to get back to our lives. I would just suggest just keep riding it out for another couple months. Just keep trying to do your best to be safe, keep clean, not be careful you don't say, this is my close-knit group, we're all smart, we don't mess up, so we'll hang out. And then find out 3 other people in that group do the same thing with another group. And before you know it, all of a sudden these little groups kind of get caught up. So just be careful. That's all I can say.
Dylan?
Yeah, you know, we're only 11 days out from Thanksgiving, so, you know, some people might have been a little bit lax. You've seen a few more people when they shut down, but, you know, we're not necessarily going to see the numbers reflect that right away, and Christmas might be even worse, so I definitely recommend folks not travel and just ride it out a little while longer. You know, it might not be affecting folks in our town, like Matt said, we might not have a civic leader who's come down with it, but I know, you know, in my family, one of my siblings is spending, you know, working double shifts in a COVID unit. So, you know, that cascades out to our whole family too. Now they have to deal with their schooling and transportation and cleanliness and separation, and it's just a lot. And some little slip-ups here and there can really have a big impact on other people, never mind our own health. So we just got to keep the guidelines in mind. You know, keep masks, keep our distance, travel as little as possible. We don't want it to get worse here in Barre, and you know, it's when they're setting up field hospitals again in other parts of the state. People think that that's bracing for something worse, not for something better. So it's gonna be maybe a long picture, personally for a lot of people, but it's better than needing to attend funerals on Zoom. I'll say that much. So that's my piece.
All right, thank you. Jessica, anything else to finish?
Nope.
I got one last comment I just throw out there is, no matter what your feelings are on the subject, just remember as the numbers rise, the governor will continue to add additional boxes that you can work within. So if we don't want more restrictions on what we're allowed to do, please, if you can do it, just wear a mask. Just do the simple things so that they don't come in and try to tell you to do more. It's just one of those little things where if you wear a mask you're less likely to have to give up other freedoms. And whether we like it or not, the governor has that power under executive order, and so let's not, I know it sucks, but it's just not worth fighting that fight when it's just gonna make life harder for everybody else. And we don't need to infight ourselves underneath whatever the governor's telling us to do. Nothing more on that.
All right, thank you. Jessica, you're all set?
Yep.
All right, let's move on. We don't have anything for other, I assume. So old business transfer station RFP.
I didn't print that out for you because it is about 50 pages long, but this is just, we had discussed at the last meeting, the last regular meeting, that I had reviewed the other towns' RFPs.
Right.
And they're similar or identical to the one we had, but I just wanted to make it official that you all approved that I send this RFP out.
Yep, I think we just wanted you to look at it and clean it up and shorten things where you could. I think I was satisfied with you looking into it last time. You guys have any different opinion or thoughts on that?
I don't, Jess, could you just confirm, this really didn't change from the previous one you showed us, right? It was just a verification of reviewing others and saying it's pretty consistent?
Yeah, I didn't change anything. I looked for consistency across other RFPs, and I looked for ways that we could make ours clearer, but I felt that when I compared it to other communities, that ours was actually a lot more clear than the other communities, so maybe they could learn something from us.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
I have no further comment. I'll make a motion to, post the, RFP for the transfer station.
I will second that motion.
Motion is second to post the RFP for the transfer station. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Bill Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Next is tent purchase through the CARES Act. Jessica's been doing some numbers. I called her to give her some hints, and she's already well underway on this. She's got some quotes from different tent companies, and I've done the same thing looking online. Started by talking with the building inspector and talking with the fire chief as far as regulations, and basically any tent 400 square feet and under, you do whatever you want as far as sides, no sides, there's no permits needed. Then the inspector said as long as we keep it under 700 square feet without sides, we still don't need inspections. We can erect these tents without having to, have a permit and an inspection for it. So we've looked at tents that are 600 square feet, 20 by 30. And we looked into getting 3 sets of sides. So we have the availability if we were to set up a town meeting format. If you think of our annual town meeting where the town clerk had all the rain come down on the electronics and their documents were all messed up, you'd have the ability to keep that inside a tent just in case, and maybe some of the electronics up front. So for that time in those tents, we pull the permit, we hang the fire extinguishers, we hang the exit signs, and that's pretty much all we have to do. We need 2 exit signs and 2 fire extinguishers, and we can leave one side of the tent open, and it's simple enough to have the chief and the inspector inspect it for us. So minimal requirements to make these, once they're enclosed, be inspected. Otherwise, it would give us, we're thinking up to 7?
7.
Up to 7 tents, so 4 more for the public, or 5 for the public to be under, that we could spread out in the parking lot as overhead canopies for sun and/or for rain shelter. And get a meeting together. My thought, once again, is these could be spread out to different departments, fire station, police station, senior center, move these tents around to some of the other department heads so they can make use of them during the year for an outside event or whatever, to keep their people outside to do something. So I think we can certainly utilize them for other than just town meetings, but we'd have enough with 7 of these tents to do a town meeting format and keep people in documents protected and people sheltered from the rain. Now, I'll let Jessica give you the numbers for what she's found for the one she looked at.
So I went out and I found 3 different quotes from companies that I felt had comparable tent quality. From the first company was American Tent, and their quote came back at $29,864. The second quote that I got was by Selena Tent, and that quote came out to $22,492. And the third quote was from eCanopy, and it's essentially the same Selena tents, just sold by a different company, and that came out to $26,732. So all within the budget that we had for the tents. And if anybody has any questions, let me know.
I would just add that I looked into a bunch of different things, and I fell on the American Tent because they all seem to have similar gauges of tent, 16-ounce canopies on them.
Yep.
But the framework, in particular in the American Tent Company, was 2-inch aluminum frame poles that were 1/8 inch thick. And the gussets, or the connectors for all the poles, were all made out of steel, welded, seams in the steel, and powder coated. So very good quality. And the eCanopy gave her a quote for the Selena tent. When I looked on that in eCanopy, I believe their poles were 1 3/4 inch, so they were smaller than the two. So you didn't quite get the same strength in the frame that you had in the American tent. But through eCanopy, I did get them to give me a quote on a similar structure. In other words, 2-inch poles, welded metal corners, and they actually had a slightly heavier canopy. But their quote came out in the neighborhood of $43,000. So they were almost double the price to get the same quality through eCanopy. So the way I was leaning was towards American Tent, from what I saw online. And I don't know, I think Jessica was leaning the same way, but I don't know, I won't speak for her.
Well, I mean, I think I may have to go back and look at different quotes then, just to keep it more competitive.
I couldn't find those 2-inch poles in the other companies.
Yeah, it's challenging when you get to procurement in the state, because you wanna keep it competitive, but then it comes down to, you kinda have to give the lowest bidder the contract as well, so,
I don't believe we have to, but apples to apples, eCanopy's tent that I sent you the quote for via email is the same as this one.
okay,
So apples to apples, you have a quote on that line. If you can get a different company to quote 2-inch rails, I did see some other ones that had them, but they weren't American companies.
yeah.
And I think the pricing was still much higher.
Right, I found it, a little challenging, because you would think that there would be a lot of different options for these kinds of comparable tents, given how frequently they're used, but they're actually kind of hard to come by a really good quality tent, so.
Right.
I can go back and try and find another apples to apples comparison. I just wanna be cognizant of the, procurement responsibilities that I have, and no, you don't always have to go with the lowest bidder,
No.
but sometimes it's hard to argue your way out of the lowest bidder.
Well, if it's not, like I said, if we find out that these other companies, for example, for lowest bidders, if the Selena tent's not giving us a 2-inch pole, that's enough justification to say we want the more rigid poles. They've given us a quote for the 20 by 30 tents,
Right.
which is what we've asked for. But you can check into it. If they're not the same quality framework, I'd rather pay a little more money and have the heavier frame, because I think, it's going to give us longevity.
Right.
That's my thought. But I'll make sure, if you should be able to open that email, if you check it, if you can.
Yeah, it hasn't come through yet, but,
Okay, I'll try to send it again.
yeah,
But that will give you a quote from eCanopy for the same 2-inch, because this is a 2-inch seam. Their standard is a 1-inch seam, so
okay.
it will give you a similar to this. But you guys have thoughts on tents? I know we've been rambling about it. That's, I think, all the information we have to give you on it.
The only thought I had is just trying to So what you're saying, Greg, is 2 of the 3 quotes had a 1 1/4 inch?
1 and 3
pole versus a 2 inch?
I believe they were 1 3/4 pole, yeah, so that's substantially smaller. When you jump to 2 inch, it's a substantial difference in a pipe. And when you get to specifically to the overhead framework and stuff, the more rigid these are, the better, especially if, you know, we're gonna stake them down. And I don't know, I assume the other ones came with stake kits as well.
Yep.
Okay. So there is price differences there, and I think it's gonna show up in the weight of the aluminum alone is probably where a lot of it comes from. You know, when you go by the pound or by the ton for aluminum, it's very expensive. So if you shave a quarter of the weight off in the metal, they have a much lower overhead cost in that metal, which means they can mark it up less, but we're getting a weaker frame. And depending on what type of ratcheting systems they offer for tie downs, you know, one may have a slightly better tie down system than the other. I believe the American tent was I won't say for positive, I believe they had a 2 inch web strap for a tie down ratchet strap. And I don't know what the other ones are using for a tie down, but how it's held down is important too. I would presume for procurements, we've asked for a 20 by 30 tents, and we're getting their best pitches, and then we're gonna have to cipher between the prices a little bit because of the different specific qualities some companies offer. We can ask the other companies if they can offer us a 2 inch pole before we just go with the price, but that may not be something they can offer us, so we may have to weigh that in the decision. But I've asked her to get moving forward with it because I want to talk about it this meeting. We'll have one more meeting before the 30th of December when we have to spend the CARES Act money. So we need to make this purchase and get the check sent to these companies so they'll make these tents before December 30th.
I'm wondering, is the 2 inch frame more, for the price, maybe it's more appropriate for tents that would be seeing a long season outside instead of coming up and coming down once like tents for. I'm talking, you know, the lowest one here from Salino was 22,700. So American tent is 29,800.
Right.
That's a significant difference there.
Right, and what you don't see is I have another quote from eCanopy, which is the similar 2 inch tubes as the American tent. It's just, they quoted Salina tent, which was, I'm pretty sure was 1 3/4. To get a 2 inch tube for them, they had, it was like a West Coast Pacific tent, they called it, but their bid came in over 43,000. And that was apples to apples with the American tent with the 2 inch poles. The only difference was they had a little heavier canopy, 17 ounce instead of 16 ounce. But substantially higher price on their frame for the same frame. So I think if we, you know, the difference in the metal is, I'm very confident is what we're seeing the big swing in price from. But you know, we're all familiar with easy up tents and those pop-up tents. We don't want something like that. We want something that is more set to be permanent. I think anytime we set them up, it's going to be sort of overnight or it might get set up on a weekend in anticipation of a town meeting or something, or they won't be up for long periods. But I think the sturdier the better, the longer they'll last the town. The better they are for anchoring if they do wind up out during some wind. I think this is a place where overkill is good. But I'd encourage.
No problem with it, but I do believe we have to, when we request any revised quotes, we need to let them know that we only have a week for them to respond.
They were really good. I mean, I got all of these quotes within a couple of hours, so these companies were all very responsive.
So I'd say we have to make our request to see if they can fit the bill to a 2 inch pole to give us apples to apples. Or even if American can quote us a 1 3/4 pole to put their price in line with the other ones. And then if we want to opt up to a thicker pole, that would be our choice. But if you guys would, take a moment, it doesn't take long to look at these sites, especially with the tents laid out. You're gonna look for, we're looking for a frame tent as opposed to a pole tent. What a pole tent is the old carnival style, where you literally frame the whole outside, then you drive the big long poles up in the middle to elevate the center of the tent, then you have poles in the middle of your tent. So to avoid having obstructions, and I talked with the building inspector about this, and Bill agreed, it would be better with the frame tent to keep the open area and lack of obstructions for us for this. So we're looking for a 20 by 30 frame style tent, and you'll see there's not a whole huge array of choices out there. But if you go look at these companies, you can kind of read what it's about and see what it is for yourselves. And what I want to do is bring this up at our next meeting and make our decision then. That still gives Jessica time to finalize a contract with someone and get the check out before the end of the month.
One thing I think we should look into is, especially with the frame style, how do they span the 20-foot? Is this like a full truss piece?
No, it's all pipes and gussets, so you have, it'd be 30 feet long and 20 feet deep, and it's sort of 10-foot by 10-foot sections. So the peak of it is a 10-foot flat in the middle with a couple of connectors, and then the outside end posts, and those sort of form a triangle rib. So you would have a 30-foot by 20-foot rectangle frame. Then from the corners, you have pieces going up diagonally to these gussets, and then pipes to go between the gussets across the ridge, and then further ones that come down every 10 feet to connect vertical like rafters would be. But they're all welded metal gussets, and they're powder coated, so they should have good longevity without rusting out. And they have basically push button tangs that go through a hole drilled into them, so they lock in solid, they don't pull apart. But they, once again, should be easy, one finger to push in to slide them out. So you assemble the frame, you slide the canopy over the frame, you secure the corners, you bring up 2 pipes on one end. It can be done with as little as 2 people, you prefer 4. But this could be set up in about 15 minutes with 4 people. But the frame is that's part of the 2-inch pipe. It's a rigid frame to hold its shape without need of any other support in the middle. And then I believe every 10 foot is a stake or hold down, I'm not sure. But it comes with, I think, 4-foot rods to be driven into the ground, and ratchet straps. I think this is 2-inch webbing straps to hold it down, which should hold, something in the neighborhood of 1,000 or 2 apiece for a hold down strength. And it.
Yeah, one of the quotes actually said the ratchet strap has 4,000 pounds.
Okay. So there's multiples of those all
One of
around.
the reasons I brought that up is we've got to identify our long-term storage for these.
Yep.
Are we thinking we might want to buy a storage trailer or something that is specific to this?
I don't think so. I think that any individual tent we could move in a pickup truck with one of the town trucks. But I talked to the fire chief, and he certainly agreed that they might be able to make use of it, like training tonight. There's a lot of times they train, and you may not be surprised, but the fire department will train rain or shine, and we'll stand outdoors in it. So there might be times that they could set up a tent for training or set up a tent for a function. I know the police department's been doing a function every year, having a barbecue and interacting with the public, where they've, I think, rented tents for. So we could probably encourage them to store one there. There's certainly room at Fire Station 3. There's room at the ambulance quarters at the public safety building. And the police may or may not have an area stored. I haven't asked Chief Carbone about that, but same thing in the senior center. I would think we can store them in these different buildings so those departments can make use of them. We can ask department heads to look into that and see more, but I don't think piling them in a trailer is a good idea. I'd rather keep them in a building and in different buildings. We could even make use of the town hall. There's several of those rooms downstairs that's still empty at the town hall that we could put something in there. Not even the upstairs, I mean in the downstairs where we used to have the business offices.
You know how large these are when they are packed up? How easy it is to pack them away to the perfect size that we can have?
I don't recall. Jessica, do you recall the storage size? Somebody told me, one of the guys I talked to, but
I'm trying to see if I can find anything right here, but I'm not seeing it.
we'll have to get that answer for sure.
It's at least 10 feet long, but maybe 2 feet by 2 feet.
I would think maybe that or more, because the canvas has to be almost that big as well. So you're probably looking like, I would think 2 by 4 by 10. So, 80 cubic feet.
Yeah, well, actually, if you're doing 10-foot long, 2-inch diameter poles, you're gonna have, almost 30 poles,
Yeah, I think that's a good guess.
and then,
So 6 make a foot by 5, it's only a cubic foot for poles by 10, so 10 cubic feet. That's not that bad. So it might be less than 80.
So I'm just saying that one of the other issues we just gotta pay attention to is the 10-foot length. Like, putting him in town hall basement may not be the easiest getting him in and out. I'm not sure at the backside of town hall, is there direct access to the ground floor? I'm just not familiar enough with that building, so I just wanna, it was just more of a thought, let's just see if we need to. Maybe we still got a couple weeks, we roll in, if we thought we needed to, something to store them in, that's all.
Right, the direct access,
If we need to, we can find a place.
the direct access is off of Mechanic Street, right off the top of the hill, and it goes down the hallway. I think that is the only egress for that side of the building. But you can go right in that hallway, and there's storage in the back. They store a lot of the ornaments and stuff for Christmas down there, and a lot of those rooms are just empty. So we could very easily get them in there, I'm sure. I gotta believe there'll be room in the public safety building in the back of the ambulance bays, because they really don't utilize, I think we're storing engine 2 there and an ambulance A2 there. But there's still room behind those that we could probably fit something.
What about the basement of the senior center?
I would assume we could there as well. I haven't gone down there, but we'd have to ask Eileen. I don't think they store a lot of stuff down there otherwise. I think their day-to-day is, everything's in operations. I wouldn't think she's got a lot of things stored. DPW might want to put one down someplace. I'm sure we can find homes for them to put them places. The library may want to store one and make use of it for functions as well. I mean, there's a lot of use for these with this size, because they're not that hard to set up. And, in the event we do want to do an outside meeting, it gives us the ability. And COVID or no COVID, we may want to do a Saturday outside meeting this year's annual meeting. People enjoyed it outside. We all know how uncomfortably hot it is indoors down there. We may want to move to an outside meeting anyways, and try to make a practice of that. Maybe this will turn a corner for us, and maybe that'll get people involved if they're not stuck in a building, or if we can do it on a Saturday instead of some evening when they rush home from work, at 5 o'clock to be stuck in a building for 3 hours. Maybe we'll get more interest in our town meetings.
Sounds good.
So let's, if you could, Jess, ask those other 2 companies if they can quote us a 2-inch pipe, and ask American if they can quote us a 1 3/4. In the meantime, I'll make sure I get you all the attachments you need for my quote from eCanopy on the similar size 2-inch.
Okay.
And then we'll bring this back up at our next meeting and hopefully get it done.
All right.
Dylan, anything before we move on? All right. Our next is a policy on the board and committee use of town property. What's going on with that, Jessica?
Matt requested it to be on the agenda, so
Yeah, so the planning board, the last couple of meetings, had expressed concerns with our decision that, based on use of town property, we thought the Board of Selectmen's meeting room was the appropriate and only place people should meet when getting together. So I had reached out to the planning board and this meeting because some of their comments I just thought would be better if both boards discussed it together rather than kind of random call-outs between boards at different meetings where nobody's there to actually answer the questions. So I figured I'd ask to kind of give them a chance to come here and talk to us about whatever their concerns were. They didn't answer my offer, so, and it doesn't look like they attended. But pretty much, I just wanted to emphasize that, at least from my perspective, and I think, so I don't want to speak for Greg or Dylan, I'll let them kind of make their own. But there's a couple of things going on here. One is, we don't control the use of the town barn, that's a DPW commission item. So that has to be brought up to them to decide as a commission if they want to continue to use the town barn or not. And there's other buildings that, like the library falls under the library board of trustees, not the board of selectmen, so we don't have control over the use of the library. But right now, the library hasn't been doing anything, I think, really in that regard, but I'm not certain, so I don't want to speak for them. But because of our filters and our ionization devices we put in the board of selectmen meeting room, and because the accessibility to the public, whether it's via BCTV or the way we have the electronics set up to make it a little easier for Zoom meetings, I think you put all of that together, that was generally why I thought, you know, the board of selectmen meeting room was the appropriate space when people were going to get together to have a meeting. I don't know if either of you have any more comment on this. The planning board didn't come, so I don't want to spend too much time on it if they weren't interested in asking us questions directly.
Generally, I agreed, Matt, with that. This one we suggested initially because a lot of people have asked about their ability to see and observe these meetings is not there, and this would be a great way to get that to happen, at least get them recorded. But as far as people concerned about the confined space and air quality, as you said, you go to the senior center, they say there's fans there. Well, yes, the fans are circulating all the air and everyone's breath to everybody. It's not necessarily a good thing, it's just circulating the air in a closed box, which ensures cross-contamination for everybody in the room. In here, we have 2 air purifiers going. We have the ultraviolet, we have the ionization. In the video you shared, which I don't know how far you shared or if Jessica put up on the town site, but the whole idea of the ionized particles clinging to other particles, including virus, and bringing them into the plates and scrubbing them out of the air is important. And I don't think you're going to get a more hygienic room than this one. I think we're contaminant and allergy free, and I think we're going to be virus free because of the air purification we have going in here. I think it's the safest place to meet. I think it's the best place to meet because it can be viewed on camera or recorded to be viewed later. And I would highly encourage people to reconsider their concerns, or I wish they'd come to address them, because I really think this is the most logical, safest place to meet. Dylan?
Great, Matt said everything that I was saying. I have nothing further to add, but I would agree with all the points that both of you just made.
That being said, gentlemen, I'd love to see you both in the boardroom. We do have air purifiers. We can keep them on the table. I would love to get back to our meetings and put our money where our mouth is for these other boards and get in here together. Something to think about. We don't need to discuss it, but you guys do what you feel like doing at our next meeting. But we're asking them to do something, and I sit here alone. Well, not alone. Pardon me, Jessica. Go back to my list here. Matt, you're satisfied with what you put out there for that? It was your topic?
Yeah, I got nothing more to add.
Okay. We'll move on then. Well, next is approval of meeting minutes. I was just glancing through some more here to catch up. Have you guys read the minutes and are ready for these, or do we want to hold them off?
I've read them and I have no comments.
I've gone about 2/3 through, and I'm happy so far, so I will trust that we're okay with all of them. If anybody would like to make a motion, we'll treat the executive session separate, please.
I would like to approve meeting minutes from the meetings of December 2nd, 2020, November 16th, 2020, November 21st, 2020, and November 3rd.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second for those, was it 4 sets of minutes?
That's right.
Any further discussion? All those in those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Mark, yes.
And Greg O'Sullivan, yes. And then we have, let's see, we did 21st, 2nd, 16th, 21, and 30, correct? 4.
Just the executive session.
The executive session minutes for, does this say executive session? It should be, yeah, there it is. For November 2nd and 16th, we have.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes, but not for release for the, I believe it was November 2nd and November 16th.
Yes,
Executive session.
thank you. We have a second?
Second.
Motion is second to approve executive session minutes for November 2nd and 16th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. We'll move on to reports, correspondence. First one is from North Brookfield Local Public Access. You guys get the chance to read that letter?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I agree, local access is important, to let the public know generally. I tell you what, Dylan, we'll put you up. I like to use the clerk for this. And let you, would you read that letter for the public so they know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm just looking for it here.
All right, take your time.
Is it in the main
Yeah,
packet, or
it's
is it in
page,
that-
page 34 of the main packet.
Yeah. This is from Jake Anderson at the Brookfield Local Public Access Cable. It says, "Right, good afternoon. My name is Jake Anderson, and I am the current chairman for North Brookfield Local Public Access Cable. I've been working to create an organization that will provide public access cable services to multiple towns. By operating at a larger scale, providing service to multiple communities, this would allow me to hire a full-time staff that can provide additional and better quality content to all participating communities. This would come at no cost to the town, but instead funded by charter franchise agreements and sometimes a small public access fee to the cable subscriber. With the current uncertainty if the FCC will loosen requirements on service providers to provide local access funding, I think it would be beneficial for communities to secure a long-term contract with charter that will continually provide local access funding. The purpose of this correspondence is to gauge the town of Barre's interest in potentially participating in this service. I look forward to hearing from you. That's Chairman of the North Brookfield Local Public Access Cable, Jake Anderson.
Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
My thoughts are, I think it's a nice idea for some towns, but I don't think it would fit our town and our program. With our relationship with BCTV and our current efforts to try to expand as much coverage to all of our boards as possible, if we try to deviate from that and work with North Brookfield, I think we'd end up in a tighter box with less freedom of where we'd go with things and how we'd get more things covered. And I think it might be a little misleading, not to say it was intentional, to say that it wouldn't cost the town anything, because it would cost us our cable access funds that we do receive and are currently using for the same purpose that is expressed in the letter. So I'm not 100% certain that this is good for the town of Barre. I do think it's a good concept from North Brookfield, but I'm not sure we would be a proper partner in this.
Dylan?
Yeah, this is a little out of my normal area of expertise, but what Matt just said seems right on the money to me as well. BCTV seems to be working fine. And I've never heard any complaints from anyone about not being able to learn about what's happening in town government. I think we've got our bases covered there, but I'm open to be persuaded otherwise.
Jessica, do you have a comment? You look like you're looking to say something on it.
No, I mean, I agree with Matt where the letter says that it would come at no cost to the town, because that's exactly what I saw when I read the letter, is that it would cost the town those PEG funds, we do use and we do value. So I think the board is free to make their own decision, but I do think that saying that it is at no cost to the town is a little facetious.
Okay. I have no further comment than you guys have already made on it. I think what we have works very well as well. So, if you guys want to make a motion, great. If not, we don't have to take any access on it. It was, any action on it was just a correspondence.
I only got one more comment, and that's just, I would like to get a more concrete answer on how far we've gotten with BCTV to figure out the efforts it would take to expand various meetings getting on either BCTV or their YouTube, or actually on the TV channels that BCTV supports. I know we kind of talked about this tentatively, but I'm just curious if we made any additional steps with Rich Degon to figure out how much he can take on, or how much more assistance he might need, that we may need to figure out how to fund if we wanted to increase different boards being on BCTV. We've had, what have we got, about 3 or 4 boards that consistently end up on BCTV, and those are usually the ones that use the Board of Selectmen meeting room. Those boards that haven't been using it generally don't get on TV or on YouTube so that people can review it later. So I just want to figure out, if we wanted to be able to get the planning board or conservation or even DPW. I know DPW, we used to have a person bring a remote camera, record it, and then send it to BCTV later. I'm just curious how far we've gotten with that, Jess, or have you even had a chance to talk to Rich about what it takes, say, per show or something, so we can figure out how we can get more remote access to people, especially since we haven't been able to, meet in person.
Rick and I haven't talked about concrete numbers, but now that we're kind of on the brink of budget season, it now would be the appropriate time for me to reach back out to him and have more discussions about how much it would actually cost. But we've talked conceptually about it, because we understand that Rick is a Superman for us, but he can only do so much. There are a lot of meetings in town, and we do value that he has a a personal life, so I will reach back out to him and see what it would take, if he would need additional funding for an assistant, or what other options we have for that. I'll reach out to him before the holidays.
And that may be a position we can fund if he needs it. We might be able to advertise for somebody on a hourly rate that we put to do these meetings. It's available, and so he doesn't have to necessarily fund it and,
Right.
funnel it through him.
Right.
But it may be something he'd also rather keep in control, but just things to think about both ways when you do it. All right? Very good. Next, we have DCR has a correspondence. Just to summarize it, the Department of Conservation Recreation, Division of Water Supply Protection has posted its FY21 forest management proposals, and some of those involve land located within the town of Barre limits. So they have shared a website link here, which I'm not going to read it, but I assume this is going to be up or is up on our webpage.
It's up on the webpage. The challenging part, in which I reached out to Mr. Dan Clark here, is that they sent us that in the mail, so we can't click on the link. So I've asked him to send me the actual clickable link, because I went and I typed out that entire thing and it didn't lead me anywhere. So I don't know if it's an incorrect link or if I just typed
It's
it in wrong.
very easy to make a typo. It's got to be someplace in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 characters, so it's, yeah. So if you guys see that on your page, if you want to try to type it, great, otherwise we'll have to get the link. But they're looking for our input, concerns, whatever we might have as a board, as well as if the public goes on, it says that they can have access and comment themselves, anyone in public that wants to look at that link, if we can actually get it posted as a link. So it's something we need to look at. If we can get it up and look at it before next meeting, I'd like to talk about that and see if we want to make any recommendations or any comments before they move forward with their projects
They offered to
next
meet
year.
with the select board as well, so if you want me to invite them, I will be more than happy to.
Well, I think we have some time. It's going to be the FY, these things aren't going to happen over the winter.
Right.
So let's look at it first, but yeah, I think we'd like to have them in the meeting. But let's get a chance to review it and familiarize ourselves before we bring them back in. I'd
I
like-
would like, yeah, but if you could reach out to Dan to find out if this is one of those plans that town input matters, or are they just doing it anyway, or is there a deadline to provide response by, so that just because the plan may not go into action until spring or summer, they may approve it in 2 weeks, and then we're just stuck with whatever they're doing, and we miss our chance for comment.
Well, I would think either way, as we found out last time around, if we get enough public comment going and get reps involved, we can stop plans in process. So hopefully we will have some input either way that's valuable and heard. But once again, I'd like us to get to look at it and talk about it and have a united front to discuss it with them before we bring them in. I don't want to bring them in and bounce our thoughts back and forth as we first hear it. I'd like us to talk about the proposal and try to get a collective opinion that we might not think of until we all talk about it before we talk to them, so we can just be concise and well-informed and united when we have whatever recommendations we have.
I agree with that.
Our last input is from the Barre Trails from Steve Salvador. This is addressed to Jessica, so I'm going to let Jessica read this one.
Okay, so Steve, he reached out to me, Steve Salvador of the Barre Trails. He introduced himself to me, so he said, "My name is Steve Salvador. I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Barre. Over the past couple of years, there was a group formed called the Barre Trails Group. Representing the group last year, I met with the Selectmen about building multi-use, non-motorized trails on town property to promote health and fitness. After receiving approval from the Selectmen and consulting with Floyd Kelly of the Conservation Committee, we began building and restoring old existing trails on the town Farm Hill property. We have received a lot of volunteer help from local residents, and the trails appear to be getting a lot of use from hikers and mountain bikers. So far, we have completed roughly 5 miles of single-track trail.
Wow.
COVID-19 has certainly slowed our progress, but we're very happy with what we've accomplished so far. So his reasoning for bringing this to the select board tonight was, to bring you guys up to speed on the updated map on what's been improved since the last time that they met with you, I believe earlier this year, or last year. And, that's on one of the following pages. There's a map that includes completed trails and in-progress trails. And this is the section that is behind the senior center. So I met with Steve after he reached out to me and talked with him about, how I can help him by applying for grants that the state has. So we had some conversations about that, on how we can help, improve their mission and improve their visibility, because, he let me know that there's really like no signage and that people find out about this area by word of mouth. And so I think it would be really great if I could, there is some state funding, there's a Mass Trails grant, that we could potentially use some funding to increase the visibility, increase signage on the trail so people don't get lost, things like that. He has a lot of great ideas on expanding trails in town, and I think it would be a really great thing for the town, because right now, during the pandemic, we've seen that a lot of people are interested in being outside again, so this could be a big way to attract people to the town.
Very nice. Looking at their map, it looks like it's quite extensive already. They're touching Worcester Road down by Kathy Lane, as well as all the way out to Nichols Road and back on Town Farm Road. So it looks like they're getting a couple of good access points, and that's they do say 5 miles already. That's
single track, so
that's
means that's a lot.
That's pretty good. I mean, I know a lot of people that go a lot of places to mountain bike, and they travel to do that. To get 5 miles here in a tight loop like that in town is fantastic. I'm very impressed that this has only been about a year since I remember them coming to us. And I think Mr. Lips at the time suggested we try to get solar going along in that same area, and it just didn't work out with it. But very happy to hear that. And they've asked that we maybe consider letting them use our meeting room once their monthly meetings can start back underway with the COVID restrictions. I would like us to entertain that. They'd be allowed to have monthly meetings here, and that they be allowed to begin whenever they like, given the fact that this is the meeting room and there is the air purifiers. Gentlemen?
I'm in full support of any board, commission, subcommittee, et cetera, using the Board of Selectmen's meeting room within the regulations that are in place at the time. So assuming there aren't any increased regulations that reduce even further the number of people that can meet, then I still believe the Board of Selectmen meeting room is the appropriate place to do that. As well as Zoom, I think for most people, if you're comfortable with Zoom, it's still the safest, because for many people, there's no need to actually be in person depending on the subject matter. Not all boards can work very well that way, depending on, like, sometimes the planning board, it's a little harder to review drawings as a group if not everybody either has a full-size set in their living room to look at, or big enough monitor to actually share a drawing and then be able to actually zoom in and see what they want to see.
We can all contest to that. They're trying to flip through our, to be online with one device and have our tablet to try to find papers and documents, and shifting through sometimes dozens of pages to find the right one is cumbersome and difficult. So there are certainly times where it's part of why I like being back in the boardroom. It's a lot easier to hold these things in my hand and open them up and look at what I want and get them ready than it is online. So yeah, I would encourage it if they can. Once again, obviously with whatever restrictions and limitations are current. But maybe, that's what I'm thinking. We could ask Jessica to reach back out and let them know that they're welcome to use the boardroom whenever they like. They just need to schedule with her and, use whatever current guidelines we have for the building. Dylan?
Concur with both of you on that. I'm very pleased to see this, how much work has been put into this project in such a small amount of time. And I think outdoor recreation is just one of our strongest suits here in town. And it's a no-brainer to try to stretch that, develop that as much as is feasible. It's only a net benefit to the town. So hats off to the trails.
And I do believe we just appointed a signage committee in town that might want to consider some signs for this. I would recommend that committee take it up and look into finding some signage, talk with this group and see what would be appropriate, and maybe we can pick a couple signs up and, considering possibly parking areas for it, access to it, type of trail, and figure out what might best suit it. They'll know where they intend to access it from and what kind of amenities there are for parking or access from those different locations. But we can certainly help out and encourage a use. Anybody have anything else they'd like to do for a selectman report?
I do not.
The only thing I have, it's, we've talked about it a little bit, a couple times tonight, but, and I know there's been some emails between Jessica and I think even a couple of those emails, I probably copied the board when it comes to just talking about agenda items or things. But when it comes to public access to meetings, for me, it's pretty important, especially now with various executive orders limiting indoor attendance to various things. I would really like to see what we can to support various boards and commissions, and I know Jess has already reached her hand out, but to get them to use Zoom and also try to work on recording those Zoom meetings so they can be posted for later use, or potentially even shared with BCTV so they can convert that recorded session and put it on the TV or put it on YouTube. And there should be a little bit of work with the people that are running those Zoom meetings, to help them understand that, like, how to do it. Not just how to operate the controls, but, like, where do you point the camera? I've been on some where it looks like the camera's pointing at the ceiling, so it's more like an audio recording. And I think that's a fine line between meeting the governor's executive order about recording a meeting. If the public can't attend, I think they should also be able to see the meeting, not just hear it. But that's just my opinion. But I would just like to see if we can kind of work with the other boards. Maybe we should look at some type of standard across boards and commissions so that when the town goes to one meeting or another and they're looking at old video or old TV, there's some continuity between what they expect to see and what they expect to hear. So I would just, for me, it's really important. I'm still trying to maintain, pretty much from the time I started campaigning for a selectman, was transparency. We really should have nothing to hide from the public. So I think it's really important we get these things on video, especially if people can't come into the meeting and meet, and make that video available, especially for people that may not have been able to attend or view that meeting at the time it's being recorded.
Absolutely agree.
And I don't know if anybody here, or if Jess, you have some type of recommendation on how we can try to get other boards involved. I know sometimes you can only extend the hand, but if they don't want it, they don't want it. But I do think we should at least review the regulation from the state and determine if a video recording is the requirement, or audio is acceptable, so we can at least clarify with the various boards and commissions chairpersons, what that requirement is, so that we can make sure we're meeting it.
Yeah, I believe it was a recommendation that we make every effort to do a Zoom or a viewable recording, but I don't think it was required. I think they identified the fact that we could do this remotely, and that they strongly encourage us to allow public access or live viewing, but I don't think it was mandatory. But I agree, it warrants review, and I think regardless of what the mandate is, we have the ability to make these available, and I think we have the responsibility to be transparent and have them viewable. So I agree completely. There's nothing that any committee should be doing that they shouldn't be able to do proudly in front of the world. And I think we should make every effort to show people that, and I think that's what builds trust in your government is the transparency. And I think that maybe some of these boards don't understand, no matter what type of role it is they have in town, they have a public role. And it makes skepticism amongst people when they can't see us. Doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, it just means that people question why they can't see it if they want to. And it does great for your own board and your image of your own board to go that extra mile to make sure that people can watch it and review it. And I would highly encourage people to think about that and to take the steps and reach out to this board and to this office and get the assistance they might need to get these Zoom meetings going.
Thank you. That's all
Okay.
I had to add.
Dylan, do you have anything before we turn this to Jessica?
No, but I do want to say I agree, that we should be making the meetings be as accessible as possible. And Zoom technology, it's pretty easy. And if we just need to spend a little bit of time, volunteering Jessica's efforts as always, but if we can spend a little time making sure everybody's up to speed on making, performing our duties in a modern way. And in 2020, Zoom is, like I said, it's a no-brainer. So the more transparency, the better for everyone. So I agree with both of you, and that's all.
Very good. With that, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I have reached out to the board and committees and offered my help to teach them how to use Zoom, and it's a fine line because I can't really, there's no enforcement that I have, no enforcement authority. I can't, force these boards and committees to do very much. I can only encourage them to do best practices, but I'll try my best to maybe craft a different message or try to kind of understand behind the scenes what the root of the issue is with the boards and committees, why they really don't want to be involved in the technology, and how I can kind of do my best to address their concerns, try to make it seem less scary. I don't know. I'll reach out and try and see what I can do.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
So for my report, I just wanted to briefly go over a couple of housekeeping items. So we have the Fy22 budget coming up. The Finance Committee met last Thursday to work on their letter to send to the department heads. Our revenue projections at this time are still uncertain, especially when we think about what we will be getting from the state. So as is typical, we're going to request that the departments level fund their current budgets and then request for additional funding through supplemental budget sheets. And then we'll see as we go from there. Beginning of January is when we'll get back into the swing of things, and we'll be heading into another budget season. Last week I went through the grants that we received recently for the various departments. I think I did not mention the Maya risk management grant that the DPW and sewer department received. This includes 3 flammable cabinets and chainsaw safety equipment. So overall for the year, since July all of our departments have worked very hard on receiving over $250,000 in grants, and there's only more to come throughout the rest of the fiscal year. So it's looking, I think we're looking really good for the community right now.
Excellent.
We have our liquor license renewals are in process. They will be at the next select board meeting for approval and signatures. These will need everyone's signatures, so around that time frame, if everybody could get in and sign those, I'd really appreciate it. So the fire station building committee is another committee that's been doing really good recently. At our next meeting, we're going to be reviewing potential RFQs for feasibility and design services, which will put the committee on track for requesting funding for a study at the next annual town meeting, which was a goal for this committee. It was by, well, I think it was originally by the last annual town meeting that they would have a request in, but because of the events that happened since the end of 2019 until now, that didn't happen. But we're looking forward to moving forward with that project. I also wanted the board to review the assistant collector position description. I know this was mentioned before, but the roles and responsibilities in the treasurer collector's office, they do need to be reevaluated to best reflect the work that is currently being done. So I've attached 2 new job descriptions that Andrew and Sharon, the former town administrator and the former treasurer collector, they actually developed based off of the work that is actually being done in the office. I find that based off of what I've observed in my conversations with Andrew and Sharon, it does reflect the work that is being done there. So I think sooner rather than later, we don't want to go too far with these positions having kind of an imbalance of responsibilities in the event that somebody decides to leave or retire or whatever, and we have to go forward with hiring someone new. We just want to make sure that what's being done is reflected in those positions. So this isn't something that you have to decide on today, but I just wanted to put those in front of you for your consideration. So the next thing is a remote work policy that the employees have asked me about, and I'm asking the board to consider. And I know that at the town hall, we are essential employees. We don't have a lot of staff in every department, so the staff who do work in these departments are really essential to being here when the public needs services. With that being said, I think, you know, with the telework hardware that we have, I think I would be really appreciative if the board would consider working with town council on developing a work from home policy, even if that just means allowing staff to work from home in inclement weather. It's my understanding that in the past, if town hall had to be closed for a snow day, that's kind of like a day's worth of work that gets dropped. Whereas now, since we have these hardware, people could work from home. There's components of every job that can be done at home, some more than others, but I think that especially when we're looking at this time of year and the weather that we get this time of year, I would like to have a formal policy that would allow people to work from home, at least in inclement weather. And talking about inclement weather, I just want to recognize our fire department, police department, and DPW, who all deserve the extra recognition this week after the heavy snow and rainfall that we had this past weekend that left some damage in its path. I know there were a lot of accidents, a lot of trees down, and a lot of heavy snow to be removed. So I think that everybody in those departments, you know, they, as they always do, rise above and beyond their call of duty. For the holidays, I wanted to remind everybody that the Henry Woods building will be closed on for Christmas on Thursday, December 24th, and for New Year's Eve on Thursday, December 31st. Just because of the way that the holidays fall this year, they fall on Fridays. The town hall, or the Henry Woods building is closed on Fridays, so we're gonna recognize those holidays the day before instead. So other than that, I am going to be in MCPPO training this week, my second to last installment of this, and so if anybody needs me, I'll be accessible through my email or cell phone.
Okay.
And please, I know that was a lot, so please ask questions.
Dylan, I'm gonna let you start this time. We'll give you the easy hit ones if you want them.
Questions of your report? Well, I do like the idea on the face of it of having a remote work policy, especially when it comes to weather and, other things happen. There are plenty of people who have long commutes, car troubles, things like that. Happen. So, if whether in terms of whether in the case of weather or just some sort of work-life issue, an employee can do some tasks from home and it helps them and they get cleared from their department head or from their manager, then it only seems to make sense that we don't need as many people driving in their cars every day. That's kind of we're in a new world and I don't see why we should go back on some things just because they were traditional approaches for so long. So I would like to work on a home work policy. I think it's a really good idea. Otherwise, I would need to look at the, did you mention the fire station building committee meeting, Jessica?
Yes, their next meeting is December 16th at 6 p.m.
Other than that, I don't have any questions about the report, but I'd like to look at the assistant collector position description, tease that part a little bit more. Other than that, I don't have any specific questions.
All right. Matt?
Just understanding working remotely with tablets covers kind of what the what part, but I'm just curious, is there a way that employees can access the voicemails or be contacted by like a call forwarding process? So if somebody is working remotely, they can receive calls as if they're in the office? I've had comments from some of the general public where it's been difficult. They felt calling and then getting responses back in a timely manner, or feeling like they got lost in the list of follow-up items on somebody's to-do list. I was just curious, is there any way that people could get accessed via phone when you set up a program like this?
So as far as call forwarding, I don't know if our phones have that capacity, but we can check our voicemail remotely.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're on that first topic. I just want to say that in general, I want employees in this building to work in this building. This is 100% public access. That's what this town hall is all about, our Henry Woods building. Remote access when someone needs to get a dog license doesn't help them, or when they need to come into person and they want to straighten out something with the assessors, the collectors, or they need to pull the building permit. A lot of these things, they have questions in person. And I want to really stress that in general, I think in-person employment is the main topic. However, as far as inclement weather, not missing work days, I think it's a good idea. And to have some sort of formalized policy for how we do that, what their hours are expected to keep, and what sort of contact they're expected to have when they do get those remote days, I think a policy is a great idea. But I've just, my thought on it is I'd rather it be a rare occasion. I don't want to see like Tuesday work from home day or something like that. our hours are limited here as is to a 4-day week, and I want to keep public access to this building as open as possible. You guys have anything to add to that? Does that sound reasonable?
I mean, I would agree with that, especially after we get past the pandemic. You know, during the pandemic, I could see a little overlap where, I'm not as comfortable asking the employees to deal with the general public
Right.
quite the same way right now.
But they could still be working without the public
After
in.
the
but-
pandemic, I completely agree that the policy should kind of be more geared to get into work. But if there are certain extending circumstances or situations, then we can probably look at how you might be able to work from home. Like kind of like hit or miss, not necessarily as a standard 1 day a week or 1 day a month, but again, extreme weather or extreme personal situation when given the appropriate approval by your supervisor. Under certain conditions that our policy should identify for them.
Okay. Anything else in there you want to talk about, or? It's just going to be me then. The holidays. I think the Thursdays is a good idea for the day off, but I think those days are typically declared by the select board as to giving all the employees a day off. So I agree, we do typically give a day off for any holiday, and I think Thursday is a good choice, but I don't know if we have to officially declare it through us, but I typically we do, I think, unless I'm mistaken. You guys have any thoughts?
Under the personnel policy for the 10 standard holidays, if they fall outside of a normal workday,
We give them,
it's closest to either the Thursday or the Monday. You know, depending on if it lands on a Sunday, it's the following Monday. I think the policy kind of clearly defines that.
it's already spelled out, so, okay.
Yep.
'Cause I know there was debate before, and I forget what holiday, people wanted to get Monday, or, because it fell on a Friday, or some people had the Monday, there was something that came
That
up,
wouldn't be
is,
all of our employees.
Right.
So one employee doesn't get 2 days off if they happen to work 5 days a week.
right, right.
So like DPW still just gets the Friday, police still just gets the Friday, most of your public safety just gets the Friday off, not the day before. I think when it comes to the Board of Selectmen, what we've done in the past is we've approved kind of an early release on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, because it's not built into the policy to pay them off.
That's probably what I'm thinking, because I remember Andrew brought it forward, and we had something, and you were very uncomfortable when we went and did it, but we gave them some extra time off on the holiday, maybe because it fell on, would have been what, Thursday last year.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I think we gave them, they had Friday anyway, I think we gave them early release Wednesday. That's probably what I'm thinking of, because we did a little extra that way.
Well, it's actually interesting because
But-
the personnel policy does spell out what happens if the holiday falls on like a Saturday or Sunday, but it doesn't spell out what happens if the holiday falls on a Friday when the municipal building is closed. So that might be something that we want to clarify in the personnel policy, is that if the holiday falls on a Friday for the municipal building employees, they get that previous Thursday off or something.
Yeah, and I think in this times we've had, some of the employees still have to come in, like the payroll still has to be done and things, and sometimes they still have to come in anyways, and they get comp time or time and a half, and I don't know if that's defined and how they, if they're compensated or if they're given, comp time. But we ought to look at those and try to get a more, definitive answer or outline as to what happens. Because there's certain positions, just like, the police and fire, someone's gonna work. They're gonna get a holiday pay or some time for it. And those unions and those chiefs set up how that works. But we have a similar situation with payroll and some things in town that have to still be done. And I don't know if we've outlined that in the policies, but we ought to look at that as well. So that I don't want anyone to say they have some ambiguous treatment. I want everyone to get the same expected and know what they expect. I think what it was is, we had some inclement weather a year or two ago, and they closed the building, but certain people had to still come in. So other people were given the day off for a snow day, and other people still had to come work it. And the question was, are they gonna be compensated for that? Because it's a regular work day, but it's a day beyond what the other people had to work. You know, maybe if we do a remote policy, that won't happen anymore, because they can still work from home. But, you know, I just want to have a little more discussion about that before we move on. So if it's in the policy, absolutely, then we don't have to do it. I want to make sure that it's done properly. If it had to be approved by us, then it's great. If it doesn't, then fantastic. It doesn't. I'd rather approve less if we don't have to.
I agree, and I think, even Labor Council would probably say that, even though it's not clearly defined, the intent is with the personnel policy to do what Jessica said, you know.
The Thursday
That
before.
Friday is an odd day for, what, 3/4 of our personnel that aren't, you know, everybody pretty much outside of DPW and public safety. So, I could see him saying that Friday, Saturday, Sunday is one group's weekend and Saturday and Sunday is another. So, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we'd have to revise the personnel policy, but it probably wouldn't hurt down the road just to clean that up so there's no future debate or question about it.
All right. So we're going to review the job descriptions for the treasurer and accountant, assistant positions.
Tonight?
No. I'm just, we're going to do that. That's our homework for next time, as well as if you guys can look up some of those tent sites, just, it won't take you long, especially if you just go to the 3 that she's outlined. I found looking at a lot of other ones, you're getting out of the country and you're getting, you know, designs and tents where you put your own murals on it, or your specific uses for, I don't know, trade shows and things. Straightforward tents that weren't that many to choose from, and it'd be worth just taking a quick look to see what we're talking about before we spend the money, hopefully in 2 weeks. Everything else should be good? You good? You guys all set?
I am.
Look for the appropriate motion then.
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Have a motion to second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Not Urban, yes?
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sandy and Jessica.
And next month.